show you how to make an apron, pattern and all. These are great, great gifts and also just like a nice thing to have for yourself. Who doesn't like an apron? What, you like getting shit all over your clothes? Come on. Let's talk supplies. For this, you really just need basic sewing stuff and the fabric to do it. You need 1 yard of fabric for the front of the apron. You need another yard of fabric for the back of the apron. And then you need a little under a yard in order to cut out your pocket piece and the pieces for your straps. As you can see, I am doing those in the same color as the back of the apron. I think it looks nice. Now I'm going to show you how to make a pattern. I have here 6 pieces of paper, printer paper. You know me, I'm obsessed with painter's tape. And by obsessed, I mean I can only ever find my painter's tape for some reason. So I've got my 6 pieces of paper here, and the most accurate way to get an apron pattern is to trace an actual apron. But if you're watching this and you're like, I'm trying to make an apron, I obviously don't have one to trace, that's fair. I'm gonna trace an apron, and I'm gonna give you all the measurements. So I have this apron here, and I am going to fold it in half. Once you have your apron folded nicely in half, the next thing you're going to want to do is you're going to want to trace it with a pen. When you're making things like this that look weird if they are not the same on both sides, it always kind of behooves you to cut on the fold and to also make your pattern pieces with it cut in half. It's just a good way of ensuring that the left side and the right side are going to look the same because they were cut at the exact same time in the exact same way. So I've traced my apron and I'm going to take it out of the picture now. All right, I made all the lines thicker so that they were easier to see on camera. Next thing I want to do is I'm going to go to various spots on this pattern around the outline, and I'm going to measure a 1/2 inch away. Why? Because our aprons today have a 1/2 inch seam allowance. So what we traced was a finished apron. We need to cut pieces that are a 1/2 inch bigger than a finished apron. That way we can account for the seam allowance. This curved edge right here is a little bit trickier because you're kind of trying to like match a curved shape, but just do your best with your measurements. And I'm sure it's going to end up really nice. I already have it lined up right here with my ruler, so I'll just draw a straight line straight up there. And I can do something similar here. I'm using a quilting ruler, so I got a couple different 1/2 inch options here. Okay, for all the places that I wasn't able to draw a straight line, I am going to take my ruler now, and I'm going to try to connect those dashes. Okay, now my pattern for my apron is the red line. So when I cut this out with scissors, I'm cutting along the red line. Now, for everyone who doesn't have an apron at home, let me give you some measurements so that you can draft a pattern like this without tracing an apron. Obviously, you're going to be taking some artistic liberty here with this curve, but give yourself some credit. I bet you can draw a pretty good apron without an apron. You know what I'm saying? So this long edge right here is 30.5 inches. That's this whole edge right here. The piece right here that goes on the chest, this is 5.5 inches. The bottom of the apron right here, this is 14 inches. And this area right here, from the bottom of the curve to the top of the chest, that way you can kind of guesstimate where your curve is going to go. This area right here is 9.5 inches. So there is the pattern in its entirety if you need to take a screenshot or whatever to draw it yourself. With our pattern made, we need to cut out our front and back pieces. Now, hold on one quick second. Let's say that you have access to an embroidery machine, or you'd like to hand embroider someone's name on the apron, or a classic apron saying such as, kiss the cook, or if you don't like this food, I'm gonna jump out the window and everyone is gonna know it's your fault. Classic Apron sayings. You wanna get that embroidery done before you cut the fabric out of your pattern. You have another point where you can embroider something, which is where I personally am going to embroider something. I'm going to put a name on the pocket, and we're not on the pocket step yet, so I'm not worried about it yet. But I just wanted to give you that heads up in case you were like, I really wanted to add a classic Apron saying on this, such as, all this food that I cooked today was found outside in a bucket. Can you still taste the seasoning in my food even though all of your teeth are missing? Classic Apron sayings. All right, we are going to take our front fabric and we need to make sure that it is folded in half lengthwise. How can you tell length versus width, especially when you're just working with a yard of fabric? The length of your fabric is marked by the selvage edge. That's that white edge that usually has like barcodes or whatever on it. Or maybe it's the same color as the fabric, but it doesn't just feel right. That is your selvage edge. Lining those edges up ensures that you have it folded in half on the width. Width-wise, I literally don't know what I just said because it is 6 in the morning. With the fabric folded in half, we are going to cut our pattern on that fold. The pattern that we made is half of an apron. So cutting it on the fold would open up and give us a full apron. If the fabric that you have chosen is directional, meaning it will be impacted depending on what way it's turned, make sure that your fabric is facing the right way up. You are going to cut out one piece for the front and one piece for the back using this pattern. If you hear that sewing machine in the background, it's because I have it embroidering the pocket I was talking about. But I have the front and the back pieces cut out. I mean, that is apron shaped in my opinion. For your pocket piece, you need to cut out a rectangle that is 18.5 wide and that is 15.5 long. It's gonna get folded in half and make a nice sturdy pocket. For the straps for your waist, you need to cut out 2 5 by width of fabric inch strips. So that comes out to about 5 by 42 inches. And for the straps that go around the neck, you need to cut out 2 2.5 inch by 36 inch strips. Take your back piece, and if you need to iron out the fold that you were cutting on, this is the time to do it. I'm gonna definitely do that right now. Placing right sides together, you are going to put the front and the back pieces perfectly in line with each other. And you're gonna wanna go around and either pin or clip this so that it is the same the entire way around. Oh, my embroidery is done. Oh no. It's a really good thing I chose golf fabric, not just something kind of plain. Otherwise, it would look like my brother is a server at a Shrek-themed restaurant when he wore this apron. So I have this all pinned together nicely. And at the bottom of the apron, I left about a 5-inch gap here, 5-6 inch gap that I have marked with 2 pins on either side. Why? Because when I sit down on my sewing machine, I'm gonna go around this entire thing, but on these spots at the bottom where I marked with the 2 pins, I am going to backstitch a bunch and I'm going to stop. I'm gonna leave an unsewn hole right here in between the pins because we're gonna pull the entire apron out through this hole. So 1/2 inch seam all the way around, but leave a hole and make sure to backstitch. Before I sit at my sewing machine though, I'm also going to pin my straps in my pocket. So let's do that. Okay, so you have your big pocket rectangle with the massive name on it, or not. You're going to fold that right sides together and you are going to pin along this as well, doing the exact same thing as the apron, where you're going to leave like a 3 or 4 inch hole at the bottom to pull this out of itself. The pocket, you can sew at a 1/4 inch seam. You don't need a whole 1/2 inch for the pocket. In fact, it's not you can. You need to sew it with a 1/4 inch. Like the dimensions I gave you are to be sewn at a 1/4 inch. So I don't know why I made it a suggestion. It's not a suggestion. You sew it the way I tell you to. Shrek's big day at the course apron. Lastly, we're gonna do our straps. So the process is the same on all 4 straps, but I'm gonna show you on one of the big ones just because it'll be a little easier to see. You're gonna take your strap and folding right sides together. I know this is black fabric, so it's the same on both sides, but folding right sides together, you're gonna fold it in half like this. And I am gonna use my iron to press it in half like this so that it stays nice. Now that that is pressed in half, go along and pin the sides. And what we're gonna do on one of the ends is leave it open because we have to turn it out. But the other end, when you get to your sewing machine, and you can feel free to take a ruler and mark this for yourself, but you're gonna get to the tippy top of where you're sewing. That would be right here for me. And then I'm gonna go down at a 45-degree angle towards the fold. That is going to give my apron strap a finished look of like a nice little point. Why? I don't know, it just looks nice. Why not, you know? So now that all that's gonna be prepped, I'm gonna finally sew all of the stuff that I've been talking about. All right, we have everything sewn. Now we need to turn all of this stuff right side out. So first thing I wanna do is I'm gonna go ahead and just trim these corners. Don't trim through the stitching that you just did, but just to make it pop out a little bit easier. And then just go in through the hole that hopefully you backstitched and pull it out. As I was sewing, I thought of some more classic apron sayings that maybe you'd want to embroider on one of yours. That's not steamed broccoli, I'm just straight up farting in here. Yeah, I garden, but I'm a freak in the sheets. Someone please text my ex-wife and let her know that you like the meatloaf. It was her grandma's recipe. I know it would mean a lot to her to hear it. Sure, the divorce was messy. What divorce isn't? But there's still a lot of love and respect there as we continue to co-parent our multi-poo, Bret Michaels. You know, just classic apron stuff. I mean, you could buy that in the store, but why when I'm teaching you how to make it, you know? All right, poke these corners out with your fingers, or you can use a chopstick or something pointy, pencil. You're gonna need something like that for the straps in a second. I think this is a really thoughtful gift. And I'm not just saying that because that's what I'm making people this year. I just like, who doesn't like to have like an apron, like a custom apron that was made for them, you know, because it's something that gets used. Same thing with the pocket, turning it out. All right, when we get to the straps, I did it in green so that hopefully you can see the triangle I did. First thing you want to do is you want to trim off that excess fabric from that triangle. So it looks more like this. Then using a chopstick, a pencil, I'm gonna use the non-marking side of this pen, should work out okay. Kind of pinch the fabric so that you can, you know, make it come apart a little bit. Not like actually come apart, but you know what I mean? Like you're making like a pillow here. And then take that instrument and shove it into the gap that you are creating. And then you can kind of just work the fabric over it as you get it all the way down to turn it out. It's a little bit more difficult on the thinner straps. I'm gonna keep it real with you, but it's not impossible. With all our pieces turned out, now we need to go around and we just need to press all of our seams. Everything that we've made is going to get a top stitch. It's just a surefire way to make sure that everything stays in place after it gets like washed or something, you know? We want our gifts to survive and last a long time. That is one of the many things that separates them from the cheap shit that you can buy in stores. With the holes that you have, take the raw edges and fold them in and then press over that fold. With all our pieces ironed, it is time to start the assembly. So I'm gonna take my top straps and I'm going to pin them in place on the top of the apron. Duh. Now, as you may have clocked, you have some unfinished edges here on the ends of the straps. That's okay. We are going to tuck those under and make them no longer a problem. You have two options on this. You can either sit here and like tuck the raw edges inside, or you can like cut a corner and do what I'm gonna do, which is I'm physically going to fold this down and sew it down. This works fine for me. You can't see it, you know? So I've got my little raw edge tucked under. Make sure that if you do that tuck, it's still straight on the top. And I'm going to attach this to the top of the apron. And just with a ruler, I'm gonna try to make this go like 1 1/4 inch down. You can kind of eyeball where you want to place it, but I want to do 1 1/4 inch. And the reason behind it is the top stitch that I'm going to do around my entire apron is going to be done at 1/4 inch. So if I have this at 1 1/4 inch down, my top stitch can run right over it, and that will leave 1 inch below on the strap for the stitching that I'm going to put on the strap. I think it's just going to look cleaner. It's going to be a nice 1 inch box of stitching. We'll get there. You'll see it. Make sure that the little points are done complementing each other, like that they're both pointing like either towards each other or away from each other, whatever you want, and that they're not both pointing to the left or the right. And then the other thing that is very, very important is obviously making sure that these straps are at the same height and distance away. Symmetrical. I'm placing pins on the bottoms and on the tops to hold these in place. All right, now let's move on to the side straps. You're going to take your thicker straps, and my points on the top are both pointing in at each other, so I'm going to do the same thing with the ones on the side. So I'm going to make sure that this is pointing the right direction. Fold over that raw edge. These thicker ones, it might be easier to tuck in the raw edges if you want to try that, but I'm going to fold over the raw edge, and then same deal, but a little bit farther in because it's bigger. So this is 1/2 inch from the top is where I'm putting it. And then I'm going to bring it onto my apron 2 1/4 inch. I personally just like the finished look specifically on an apron with the visible straps and like doing some kind of like industrial looking stitching, which again, I'll show you in a sec. It just screams like I've had this apron on because I'm ready to f shit up. You know, I'm ready to do work. Yes, chef. All day, chef. Get the f off my expo. You know, that's just my preference though. And this is my tutorial, so that's what you're gonna learn. The pocket needs a top stitch as well because it has a hole down here. But it is gonna be attached to your apron on 3 out of 4 of the sides. So what I'm gonna do quickly is I'm actually gonna take this to my sewing machine and I'm going to sew 1/4 inch down the top. Done. Now I can attach this to my apron and finish assembling everything. I placed my pocket centered, meaning get your ruler out and make sure that it is equal distances from either side, 6 inches from the bottom. I'm going to pin this in place. And remember, with your pocket and with your apron, you have holes at the bottom still. So place a couple pins for sure at those holes. You have used your iron to press them closed, but you need to make sure that the sewing machine finishes the job. With my aprons that I make, I like to take this pocket and I like to split it in half because as is, it's a pretty big pocket. So I'm going to find the halfway point and I'm going to mark it with some pins. This is all pinned and ready to go to the sewing machine. So I'm going to take it over there and do a bunch of stitching and then explain to you everything I just did, okay? Okay, let me show you the stitching that I did around here. I started at the bottom of the apron. I did 1/4 inch around the entire thing, crossing over my straps all the way. I'm sure you realized when you were sewing this together, but you really have to take your time on these curved edges, especially when you're trying to keep a consistent seam allowance. That's the top stitch. With the waist straps, I maintained my 1/4 inch and I went around the entire strap with a top stitch. I used this green because I love it. You can like see it, it pops. Once I got all the way around, I did a diagonal X right here. This is super strong and on there. These apron ties are high tension points, so we want them strong on there. That X sealed the deal, and it looks cool. For the top straps, to do a 1/4 inch, you'd be just encroaching on this too much. So I did about like an 1/8 or like a 1/16 inch. I kind of eyeballed it, but I just tried to keep it as close to the edge as possible. And then same deal, I came back here and I did a nice looking X to make these nice and strong. Lastly, we have our pocket. The pocket, I went around, we did this top stitch already earlier. I went around and I did a 1/4 inch around the entire pocket. I back stitched on the tops and on the corners to keep it strong. Then I went back and I did like as close to the edge as possible around. So it's got 2 lines, and that's to keep it strong. Then I went up the center twice, back stitching, because these are the points where it's going to tug the most. We want those to be strong. We don't want them to come apart. And just like that, it's done. This project took me 3 hours with interruptions. Really quick, easy project that someone is going to be really happy to get for Christmas. You're welcome.